in Australia post. Imagine the friction of that in like in an onboarding funnel. Like, all right, now you have to leave the house and go to the post office and stand in line, right? Like it's kind of enormous. Even like funding your account, that's such a key onboarding step for us. You have to have money to be able to see the value in it, right? You have to put money into it to be able to spend it. Until Oscar, which is effectively the real-time, payment infrastructure that launched not very long ago in Australia, someone who signed up on a Friday night, overnight batch processing stuff, closed on weekends. That was just how money worked, electronically in Australia between bank accounts. And then, the digital wallets, right? Apple Pay and Google Pay. They hadn't been long in Australia when we launched, really. Like, the only one major supported Apple Pay. They didn't support it as sort of in the way that we did, as a sort of a way to onboard. It was purely just like, if you have a card, you can convert it up into Apple Pay. So we went from a situation where we would have been waiting, customers would have been waiting 1 or 2 weeks to get a card before they could even use our product, to be able to give people instantly the cards sort of over the air that they could use on their smartphone. So really, I think, Up wouldn't exist kind of without those pieces in place. So I think sort of timing and market environment are really key factors that maybe are often overlooked. But I guess it's, on top of that, then, okay, so fine, that's great. The initial conditions, I guess, were fantastic for us, but then there's still that decision, like, so what do we actually build with all those things kind of being true? And that we're sort of guided in a sense by this mission. We've had various goes at defining it, but it's basically helping people win at money, right? It's like getting them, like trying to help people overcome sort of the anxiety and stress of money, which is a huge bummer. It's like a huge, detractor to a lot of people's happiness, right? And sometimes it's genuinely, I just don't have enough money to live. I'm sort of below the poverty line. But a lot of the time it's maybe I'm just kind of not doing a good enough job with it. Like, I'm spending too much. I don't really understand where it goes. And then, before I get paid, it's like I've run out of money, and, I'm stressing about bills that I can't pay. So we really wanted to kind of solve this at an emotional level for people. That was kind of the journey we wanted to take people on. So I have this kind of analogy, I guess, which is like, given that we want to help people at money, like, there's a few ways we can do that. And the analogy I kind of like is, instead of talking about money, like, let's talk about darts, right? How can I win at darts? How can I be a really good dart player? Because there are really two that I can think of, like two really good ways. Like, one of them is like train really hard, right? Like, do a lot of work, like put the effort in, practice, put the time in, and like, you can become an elite athlete, right? Like 1982 world champion jockey, right? You can be that. If you work hard enough, you can be this guy, right? The other way is get one of these, right? This is like from a YouTuber who's obviously an engineer and very capable. Like, he built this dartboard that you just throw a dart at it and the dartboard moves, right? Like you don't have to throw the bullseye. The dartboard just puts itself in the right spots. It can use computer vision to look at the dart, and it uses predictive algorithms to understand the flight path, and it sort of guarantees you hit a bullseye. So I think, like, we have to ask ourselves that question, like, are we trying to, provide people with a tool and then knowledge to be really good at using it, effectively creating this financial literate customer base, or are we actually providing a sort of a magic dartboard for money? We're going to do the work, so you actually don't have to know about what compounding interest is, or all of these sort of things, or what a CSV file means, or a spreadsheet. And of course, probably the answer is never like one or the other. You're always going to be on some sort of scale. But our goal has always been to push more towards the magic dartboard, like to help sort of mere mortals, normal people, be better at money, and not just kind of the financially literate or sort of the power users. And I think, just to make that a little bit more concrete, a great example of that, something that was in MVP from day one, is what we call, maybe other people use this term too, I don't think we necessarily invented it, but roundups, right? This is effectively a magic dartboard for saving. It's taking the money, taking the change from a purchase, rounding a purchase up to the next nearest dollar, and then putting that money into a savings account. So effectively, you know, from our point of view, it's helping people save that maybe didn't even think they could or weren't even aware that they should yet. And so, you know, in Up, that's basically checking a box or saying yes to a, you know, to an onboarding prompt. Yeah, I want roundups. And then we'll do everything else. Like that's it. You know, there are some additional kind of controls we've built over time to make that even more powerful, you know, to increase the power of that function. So that, you know, I guess we saw people really enjoying this as a way to start to achieve, you know, a savings balance. And we're like, how can we sort of amplify that even more? How can we round up, say, even dollar purchases? Because quite a lot of things these days, particularly are even dollars. Or how can we boost roundups so that people can say, you know, I'm not ready for a savings plan just yet, but like put another dollar away with everything I save, every roundup that I make. And that innocuous little slider at the bottom of the roundup preferences, like people have saved $20 million because of that slider. You know, like it's totally amazing. I mean, as an aside, I just think that's an awesome way to think about a feature or to measure a feature. I mean, obviously quite particular to finance, but you know, that slider there has helped Australians save 20 million bucks. They maybe wouldn't have otherwise saved. You know, so I guess those kind of features are, you know, things that we love that, you know, we feel are accessible to everybody, right? It's not that, you know, I read a book on, you know, building my financial literacy or well-being. It's like literally, it's just I agreed to this thing and it worked. It worked for me. So I think, you know, we were striving to be more than just a great execution of banking, which is probably a perfectly valid kind of way to approach the space, which is like, there's a lot of really legacy stuff in banking. There's a lot of like poorly executed or just not up to, I guess, that haven't kept pace with the industry or best practices. Like if we just executed really well on a bank today, that would still be a really worthy thing, right? But I think early on we wanted to do more than that. We wanted to try and build out that next level of functionality and sort of benefit for the customer. And I guess part of that was because we wanted to be a mainstream product. Like we didn't just want to be where we'd seen maybe a lot of kind of personal financial management apps, for example, things that are like breaking down your spend and telling you where your money goes. You know, they're really hard to, from what we saw, like keep up with, right? Like you might get to a point where you're like, okay, I'm going to do this because I'm out of ideas. But to stick with them is tough, and even maybe to get there in the first place is tough. So our goal is really, how do we bring that stuff to the mainstream? How do we sort of package it in a way that kind of normal people want to do it and see the benefit of it? And from our point of view, kind of, I guess the way to do that, the way to sell it was just to make the whole space, make banking as engaging as we can. You know, like make your banking app a happy place, like somewhere you go and you feel positive about and you feel good about, not like look at wincingly wondering, oh shit, how much have I actually spent? You know, so, you know, and, you know, so I guess I'll break that down to a few really, really basic things, right? Like banking was too hard, we thought. It's like your app is behind this login, you know, this PIN code or passcode or whatever it is, this vault door. You know, from our point of view, where smartphones have got to with biometrics, with the fact that people, you know, effectively understand how important these things are and have so much of their life in them, you know, they're treated now with the respect that they didn't used to be, when they just used to be like thrown on the table unlocked. And so that sort of opened up, I guess, to us the option to say, like, do we like to rethink that need? Like, what if you could just get a notification from a purchase, you could tap it, you could be straight into the app, you know, see how much you spent on with that merchant or with that category, or without needing to log in, you know, like, and yeah, sure, if you're going to send some money to someone or do something sensitive, we can step up and ask you for that login then. But like, let's just make this stuff really accessible, you know, your email, your photos, your social network accounts, none of those sort of put a login in front of getting into them. But for a lot of people, those are, you know, as sensitive or as personal maybe as their bank account. So really breaking that down for us was sort of a key to engagement. And of course, just making it look pretty, right? Like making it more understandable, you know, putting in the effort to move away from the sort of, you know, ledger and transaction feed to something that felt much more modern and more easily scannable and just visually pleasing. I mean, that stuff is really important. You know, like if it looks kind of boring and dry, it's just, you know, people are going to switch off. find the ways to make it interesting. So, moving away from seeing like, insights like where your money goes, from that being sort of pie charts and, a really niche play to, how do we sort of relate to people changes in behavior, whether if they're increasing spend on certain areas, or how that compares to other stuff. I guess seeing insights is not this kind of power user part of banking, but is something much more core and sort of contextual to the experience. And I think, this is certainly one of the key ways up, I think is different to a lot of neos, maybe even, globally too, is, our sense of humor and a sense of fun. Like, just because it's money, it doesn't have to be, staid and kind of boring. Like, I think we can have fun with it. Like, there are certainly times when it's not appropriate, like to make a joke or be kind of, lack seriousness. But if we can introduce these really fun moments into finances, like, that's a huge win from our point of view. So, sort of overloading the pull to refresh mechanism with a pull to save, as making that a pull to save feature, so that clears the sense off your balance and sort of, and like, it was an Easter egg. We didn't tell anyone about it. We just kind of put it out there, and of course people noticed and shared it. And I think that's kind of the benefit of little features like this. They can be very hard. I remember when we built this, right, we didn't have like BPay support, like some like thing like, okay, people got to pay bills, and it's like, oh, but we got to build this pull to save thing first. I mean, partially because BPay was like a big project anyway, and there's lots of practical reasons, but fundamentally, like, features like this can be the best sales tools that you can think of, right? Like, we could talk for hours about, our real-time event-based infrastructure and the merchant enrichment and all these kind of things. But ultimately, like, sometimes the best demo is just someone showing you, like, check out what my bank does. Like, I can flick a coin into my savings, and they've kind of sold people without having to talk about all that other stuff, which is fun. And like, people, like, some feedback we get, people start talking about being addicted to it, like, which I think is, it's a good addiction, right? It's a good habit. It's like brushing your teeth. Like, you can't really get addicted to it. Yeah, it's sort of habit forming. Like, if you do it enough, it's harder to stop than to keep doing it. But there's a benefit to the customer there, and that's that makes it okay effectively. And I think always we're looking for ways to just rethink, like, what the experience can be. Like, how can we take something that's just kind of like accepted and not even really considered and make it something that's surprising? And in some ways, I think that's a great way to communicate what we care about as well. It's like, well, we took something that was like receiving a card that was, it's not to say other neos don't experiment in this space as well, but, something that was kind of like a trifold letter thing with a blotch of glue, and make it something that, this is our one physical touch point with the customer. Can we really knock their socks off? And maybe they haven't started using the app until they get this card, and this is the thing that tips them over. And, it doesn't really cost, good ideas don't necessarily cost more than bad ideas, or just ideas where you've just accepted the status quo. So, I mean, we really try and push in that. And obviously there's a lot of these things kind of tend to have these inbuilt marketing benefits. Like, if people are really excited about receiving their up card, then they'll post it. And so we took the bet that they would be, and we made sure, like, we didn't have like numbers on the front of the card so that people could share these things, like, to really build for that kind of mindset from the beginning. And so kind of that was a lot of the thinking, I guess, and build up to launching. And we kind of launched our MVP in October 2018. And we had quite a bit of stuff in there because, like, I guess, as I've tried to explain, like, it wasn't just about, like, we weren't trying to prove the market. Like, we knew the market and the need was there. And so it was really about trying to, like, establish our place in that. Like, what were we going to do differently, and why should people care about, our particular debit card? But, like, one thing we didn't have, which I don't know, like, some people really wanted, was like payments, right? Like we effectively had this great debit card, and it rounded up into a savers, but, the only way to spend any money you put into it was to get it out of a cash machine or spend it at a merchant. And, like, we didn't hide that, and we told people we didn't not build payments because we didn't think about it or think it was important. It was just like, we wanted to launch this as soon as we could, and we're like, we'll get payments is on the way. But, like, what it really highlighted, I think, and most people were cool with it. Like, some people weren't. Like, some people were surprised. But I think it, like, if it needed highlighting, they certainly highlighted it. That, like, there can be a disconnect when you go into a really mature space, right? If you don't have everything, which you almost just can't have everything, then people are going to, sort of be maybe disappointed or at least surprised, or, okay, well, when will you have that? And I think it was kind of that experience that kind of took our thinking about this public roadmap, which we'd seen, around. We've seen other companies do public roadmaps, and kind of, if you're in sort of software, you generally kind of drink the Kool-Aid and think, yeah, it's a good idea. Like, you should just do it. It's like an API. Yeah, you should just have it. It's just kind of what you should do, best practice. But it kind of moved that idea from something that we thought would be nice to something like we actually needed in this case, right? Like, and I think if you are if you are creating a new market, if your app hasn't sort of been built before, it's you don't necessarily need this, right? Because maybe you never know what it is, and you don't want to post it out there. But in our case, we kind of knew, there's a bunch of stuff that we're going to want to build. People are going to need to really take up seriously or use it as their main gig. And so let's talk to customers about that stuff. Let's align them on this journey that we're on, and share that. Share where we're going. I think that's a really important question that customers kind of deserve to know, right? People that are trusting us with their money, they should probably have a right to know where we're going, and to some extent how fast we'll get there. And skipping ahead in some ways, I will share the learning that I don't think that your roadmap is where you should be talking about timeframes. Like, I think a now next future is great, but I've seen a lot of companies get burnt by this, and we had sort of quarterly estimates which were removed as well. It's just really hard. It's really hard to estimate. Like, everyone admits, I think, that estimating software is terrible. Is just really hard to do. And despite best intentions, you're probably going to miss your estimates. And that can create issues when customers feel like you've sort of made a promise that you're breaking. So I think it's I just don't think your roadmap's the place to do it. I think we're going to work on this stuff next is fine, but yeah, dates, even if they're quarters or halves, I think are dangerous. Your velocity should ultimately come from how often is this company releasing. Like, if I look at their app, or their blog, how often am I seeing change and evolution, iteration? That's ultimately the real proof, right? It's like walking the walk and not just kind of promising stuff. So we had a look around at roadmaps, these public roadmaps. Like, Trello is kind of where everyone posted them, and kind of that now, in here, so long-term, mid-term, near-term, but they're just kind of not very, I guess, compelling. There's sort of a list of things, like a laundry list, they can just grow forever. How do you even, and they don't just really speak to how these things fit together either. Because I guess from my point of view, I kind of realized people would ask for things where I'm like, yeah, that's an awesome feature, but we have to build a whole bunch of stuff before we can even get to that. So finding a way to be able to communicate that sort of became, in my mind, a bit of a requirement for our roadmap. And so I end up being kind of inspired from games, from certain types of games where they would post these technology trees. You'd develop this technology tree to succeed at this game. This is a particularly intense one. One I really liked, because I got a bit addicted to this game, was this motorsport manager game. You're effectively working on a team and technology, and so as you upgrade things, other things unlock. And that just really gelled with how I kind of thought about our product roadmap. It's once we get some of these fundamentals, that will unlock the ability to then build on top of that. So I really like that way of thinking, and I thought it might work. I wasn't really sure. So effectively, I did start for about a day trying to model, do data models and tooling. And a lot of people were asking me about the tree, asked me oh, what's the tooling? Is this something I can use? But I guess I realized I was sort of going down a rabbit hole, and I didn't even know if the concept itself would even work. So I just jumped into Illustrator, or Figma is probably a better choice for these days. And I've seen some good ones sort of inspired by on Figma. But can we hang something together that makes sense and speaks to this kind of dependency and gives people a good idea of what up will look like. And then with a bit of love from our head of branding, it became this tree that spoke to kind of what's been done, what's happening next, and sort of the dependencies, how things are interlinked. And I think it just is became a really effective tool to speak about where we're going. To some extent, I think it's a really great tool internally as well. You know, like it's just great to have that reference point that's not kind of a list or a spreadsheet, you know, or whatever that you can just point people to. But, you know, like it does require careful curation. Like not everything can be on here. Not everything makes sense to be on here. Like the hard part of this is not really producing it. Like technically it's working out what the right level of information to put on there is, you know, like what's just stuff that customers don't care about that doesn't really need to be on there. I think if you put a lot of stuff on there that has no customer benefit or really anything, it's kind of the wrong thing to put on there. But you know, sort of direct customer benefit. But a lot of work we do just can't be on here or shouldn't be on here. But because it's like, you know, it might be fraud systems or, you know, the way we reissue cards or, you know, things like that I don't know, don't really outbuild the picture for a customer. So I think that's kind of the art of this. If I was going to distill that down, is like working out what to put on and what not. And maybe if you were trying to do this on the existing product, the breadth is going to be a real challenge too. So yeah, this was kind of a nice interactive thing. Like, as I said, I effectively just end up building this in Illustrator, like exporting it as a vector image with some names. You can give layers names, and then you can effectively hook into that with a bit of JavaScript so that you can have like nice rollovers and you can click on the items and see what they're about. But sort of a low tech, pretty manual way, but ultimately I think quite effective at communication. And you can have fun with this. Like you can see there's spaces where we can put in, you know, sort of branding components and things like that, which is kind of cool. You know, I guess we're speaking to joint accounts. You know, we've got exploring credit. Like I think it doesn't have to be super literal, right? Like we can sort of communicate more than just a list of features because we have this ultimately just a blank canvas to draw on, which is kind of fun. And you know, like secret project, we can have a bit of fun with that too. And early days, like some feedback I used to get, or question I get a lot was like, and maybe from people that aren't from that world of like, yeah, like put your roadmap online, you should do that. Was like, well, aren't you worried about, you know, you're giving away your secret sauce, you're telling your competitors what you're working on next. And I always thought this feature was a great example of why that was not really a fear for us, you know, and I guess ultimately every feature here, some of these features are massive, some of them are smaller, but you're boiling it down to a sentence. Like if you think that's really the secret sauce, like one sentence description of what you might do, you know, almost nothing sounds good in one sentence form until you know what it is and you look back and you go, oh, that was a great description, right? Like, but before the fact, you know, this could really go in many different ways. So, you know, like something that's just about automatically transferring a percentage of your pay. And I guess that's kind of a new idea, a novel idea in banking. But ultimately, I think what we delivered for that feature was just like super cool. And like, I don't know that someone would have read that item and done it, right? Which was this really, you know, incredibly easy way to take something like a payment coming in, and rather than have to like calculate and work out a whole bunch of kind of like scheduled or recurring transfers, we can just say, look, when this payment comes in or when money comes into this from this account, I don't care what it is, let's just put a percentage into these savings accounts. So we effectively create this ability to, you know, to just automatically save 5 or 10% of your salary without you even having to think about it or even understand, you know, what a recurring transfer is. So I think from that point of view, that's never really been too much of a concern. And of course, like we had such a great response to it that we kind of ended up just going deeper. We just got encouraged. You know, we thought, oh, like, how do we add stuff to it? You know, every small change was certainly noted by people. And I think we just got to the point where we executed a fair amount of it. And we were like, let's like have a bit of fun with it. Let's talk about that next 6-12 month kind of time frame. So we kind of came up with this idea. Well, like it's a tree, it should grow. It can have new shoots in spring. And so we, you know, like came up with a bunch of stuff, highlighted it in green, you know, which was like really fun to do. And we even sort of had like this event that was just purely like, come talk about our roadmap. Like it probably helped that we were giving out like free beer. I won't lie. I don't think they were all like massive product nerds, but you know, like it was a really fun event. I think people really enjoyed that connection with Up and like seeing what we were thinking about next. Certainly brands that would never do that. Probably a lot of brands, particularly banks, generally never do that. So it was just a really, you know, fun kind of thing to do. That was kind of the team at the time, or at least some of the team, not all of them, but I think we're like 60 people now. So it was a really good thing to do. And like maybe one day in the future we can have events again. I think we kind of can, right? Like we're pretty much there. So hopefully we'll have another one in the future. We'd love to see some of you there. Yeah, so I think that's pretty much it. If you want to go see the tree, it's just on our website. You can probably Google it, but it's up.com.au/tree. Hopefully we can have some good questions now, but if you want to ask me stuff later, we'll go more in depth. You can hit me up on Twitter. That's on there is Anson. And if you've never tried up and you want to, like, there's the obligatory plug. There's a QR code there you can scan. I think you get like $10 at the moment till the end of the month for free if you do that. So yeah, happy to have questions. Hope you guys all found that interesting.
Cool, thanks, Anson. That was fantastic. Obviously, like, I love how you guys have disrupted this old industry in general, and I like the way that you've kind of made banking fun in that. Do you see any other areas or markets that you think disruption like up could occur in the way you've done it? That
we would do?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we never really see ourselves as a bank. We kind of see ourselves as about money, and like the starting point for us has been that kind of transactional core of it. Like effectively, that's kind of the top, is it the mouth of the river? Maybe it's the end, but it's where the river starts, whatever you call that bit. It's like that's where your money comes in. The stuff you spend that on, like to us, that's sort of the core, right? But there's so much that can hang off that, and we're not just kind of limited only to, in our view, like banking. It's kind of like generally it'll be, I think, financial sort of problems, the problem space, but things like investing, lending, protecting, I guess the ings, right? Like that are sort of financial. I think there's lots of opportunity to kind of rethink those in a similar way as we've done with transactional banking.
Yeah, excellent. There's a few questions in the Q&A, so I'll read a couple of them out. Apologies if we don't get to all of them. One in particular related to the tree from Jeremy. Have you ever taken something off the tree of Up?
I actually just did. Yeah, like it's a very good question, because I posed it to the company a while ago. I was like, if you could remove one thing from the tree, what would it be? So I just, as a bit of an experiment, I probably removed like the most, I think, I'll scan back because we might be able to see it. But interestingly, it was something we added in the spring tree. But if you look under the talk to us, we had this, like there's this thing in banking, like where maybe like the anti-fraud controls can be a little bit maybe overzealous at times, right? So if a bank sees a charge overseas, they might be like freak out a little bit on your account, right? Like say, oh, like, are you, like, we might block your account just to make sure you're okay. And that's often that the customer's like traveling, maybe not so much right now, but in general. So customers, mostly they'd been trained by their older banks, would be like traditional banks would say, oh, I'm going to going to be in Japan on these days, like just to let us know, like don't block my card if you see any charges in yen. So we're like, oh, maybe we should build we didn't really want to do it, but like maybe we should build this advised travel date section into talk to us. But I guess we just didn't do it, and then we're like, it's not really us. Like we'd rather just see that you're in Japan because you've opened your smartphone in Japan, and we can tell, and we'd rather just do it that way rather than have to put the life admin on you. Let's just do the work, right? Like we can do that. Like that's what technology is for. So that one, I think I sort of called it like a pruned, just going deep on the tree metaphor, like a pruned branch or something feature. I don't know that we've had any feedback about it yet. It's sort of snuck through. It's probably, I mean, if I'd done it to like something people really care about, I think we would have heard about it quickly. Like joint accounts, obviously, would have been an uproar. But I think that's what's amazing to me is probably how little we have even considered like, oh, we don't want this anymore, because really this is a couple of years old, and I think often ideas like after a couple of years, a lot of them probably don't seem as good anymore. But so far, it's held up pretty well.
That's excellent. Another one relating, sort of segues on to what you just said now from Joe. With the tree of Up, how would you communicate changes in the prioritization of the work? Like, how do you let people know, I guess, internally with your stakeholders and that it's a live document? It's always changing.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's not. I mean, I guess we sort of get away with it because we really talk about it as sort of a customer-facing thing. Like, this is not like we will, the Up particular model is like we partner with an existing bank that provides us sort of this foundational API of core banking services, And so we have discussions with them about the priority of things that we need from them. They don't necessarily like represent the tree. Like the tree is very important because, you know, I see it as our sort of contract, right, with our customers. Like this is what we're kind of promising in a lot of ways. So it certainly informs discussion, but we don't sort of go down to that level of granularity. I think it's, you know, it is kind of like, here's what we're working on right now, and here's what we think we're going to do next. So it doesn't really deal with that more sort of fine-grained prioritization.
Jeremy asks around the design of the features. So who designs the features? Can you talk a little bit about the product design engineering team structure at Up?
Yeah, I mean, we're a pretty, I think we look like, I think, a pretty normal software company. We have a team of product managers, a team of product designers, a big team of engineers. So I think, you know, like, I guess my role is sort of setting the product strategy, you know, like, and the roadmap. So what's on there and why is it on there? And then working with product managers to kind of shape what those features are. And I think, you know, incorporating some of those earlier ideas about what, you know, who are we trying to appeal to with these features and like, what are we ultimately trying to do with them? And then we just kind of work in a fairly agile way. Like, I don't think there's anything super interesting about the way we do it, you know, with engineers. I mean, I think one of the things that makes Up probably a bit different to, say, other organizations is kind of where that iteration and that feedback loop happens in the process, because our sort of background is so engineering heavy. Like they're the biggest cohort of employees that we have are like software engineers. So in some ways, that's where our biggest strength is, like execution. Like it's, you know, if it's a choice between, you know, spending a couple of months really iterating on the concepts and, you know, maybe bringing in focus groups or validation and versus like, can we build some kernel of this idea and see what actual customers like think of it and how do they interact with it? Like we kind of bias that way. I think that does make us a bit different. We probably do a bit less upfront sort of stuff and a little bit more. We know we can execute quickly. Let's just play to our strengths and then take it from there. And that's maybe a bit against trend. I think like a lot of new people that come in are very like focused on the research phase and really wanting to like dot every I before build begins. I think we're a little bit more, we just move a bit faster and a bit more intuitively than that. I think partially it's because it's sort of a lived experience problem space. Like we really know this space inside and out. Maybe not inside and out, but a big chunk of it just from having, like in my case, I've kind of been almost every persona that we're building for. It's like I've been the person that maxed their credit cards out. You know, I've been the person that ran out of money before they pay or whatever. So there's kind of that foundation to go off. I think as we mature as well, like I think what works for us today may not always work for us. And as we get into more, you know, sophisticated financial products, for example, bringing those in, there's not that familiarity there. I think then that stuff will change a little bit. They'll probably bias more towards the upfront research.
Great. So Harry asked, in your product journey, do you conduct interviews on the ground with people from all walks of life, or have you got a particular target group whom you interview? Kind of extends on a bit, I guess, from what you were saying now that you've been in all those personas yourself and probably your team as well.
There is that. I mean, I think part of our secret sauce as well is like there's this screen in Up called Talk to Us. Like we've effectively made it like just ridiculously easy. You know, some might say too easy to just jump into the app and talk to us, right? Like it's not like a traditional support channel where it's like, I mean, it is that too. Like it does that function, but it's also a place where customers can provide feedback, ideas, like report bugs. You know, we can send surveys out over it. And that's really this kind of bespoke communications tool, you know, that just represents this incredible relationship we have with our customers. So like a lot of that communication discussion informs the roadmap. Like there are items on here, like lock savers is a great example. Like we would never have built that feature normally, right? Because we're like a bank's job is like keep people's money safe, like give them their money when they want it. Yet all these customers are saying, I don't want you to give me my money when I want it. Right? I want you to protect me from myself. So I think like, you know, there's so much that comes through that. Like we're not necessarily searching for answers in that way because we kind of have a lot of information and we can sort of target some of those questions back to those people that have asked for it. Like, oh, what are you looking to do? So we don't tend to have to go out to sort of like, let's go and recruit 10 people. We just have this amazing tool where we can reach out to customers internally.
It's excellent. I have used that chat feature a couple of times, and I've used the app too. It's pretty cool. Luke asks, how do you prioritize Easter egg features? If you have any tips as well on how to get those over the line, because many of us would probably struggle with our internal companies to do that.
Yeah, like I don't think they'll never win in like a head to head, you know, like put them in a hexagon and like fight to the death kind of thing. Like it's impossible to justify them against something where it's like, this is solving actual customer pain points. And, you know, like, why, like, how can we do it? Like, I think you just have to do it by like, do we believe in this idea that like, that we should be making the odd bet, you know, like we should be taking risks and taking chances. And some of these things we can win big on, you know, like if we get it right, or we can see, you know, it becomes easier obviously as you do them and you kind of get great feedback, and like, you're not going to nail everyone, I guess, but yeah, the more success you get, I think the easier it is. But I think you just have to carve out a certain amount of time. Like, you know, like say we're going to spend X, like 5% of our time, we're just going to work on these kind of X factor features that we don't really know what the payoff is, but we kind of believe it's there. And let's see what happens. Like, I think it's like, I struggle all the time, like with that prioritization concept. Like people often come to me, it's like, what should we work on, X or Y? It's like so hard to pit two things together. I think like what works better for us is saying like, let's just like carve out a space for this class of problem, right? Like whether it's like bugs or enhancements or these sort of like Easter egg delighter type things. Because otherwise I think you'll never do them.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to approach it. We've got time for one or two more questions. There's a question here around how did you go about building trust among customers that the digital bank will keep their money safe, and you know, not have glitches, etc.
Yeah, well, I guess like you probably are going to have glitches. Like it's, you know, there are a lot of sort of systems that we rely on that go down. Like we've had our own outages, of course, but I think that, you know, like they'll just happen. It's how you respond to them. I guess that's important. Like trying to be as transparent as possible, owning up to them, being proactive when you know something's coming up, and rather than just hoping it sort of slides by without people noticing. But fundamentally, I think like trust comes from, it's kind of like, I guess those like eBay and other like systems where it's sort of reputational, like you build it up over time. It's not anything you really say or do that can give you that. So ultimately, I think our trust comes from having customers that love using us, that speak highly of it, you know, and that's like, it's not about having a, you know, like a marble headquarters down in some financial center. It's just, I think the best way is, obviously you have to get there, but it's people that use you and can vouch for you, that kind of social proof.
Excellent. We've got a question here from Andrew. When you guys launched, you had a great unique selling point. Since that time, have your target market changed? And do you find that you found your niche now, and it's hard to move out of that?
Yeah, not at all. I think like we have maybe a bit over 300,000 customers. Like, it's really nothing, right? Like, I mean, it's good, but there's a huge potential market for the app up there. I mean, I think what is interesting are like people that joined us when we launched 2 years ago, like they're all 2 years older, right? Like your customer demographic, you know, doesn't just stay young. And like we have a very young, by and large demographic. I think half our customers are under 25, like 25 or under, which is pretty young. But they're aging. So I think part of it is like it gives us the luxury, I guess, to grow with our customers. Like in 5 years, you know, maybe up. I think this happens to a lot of brands. Like they don't always just stay young. They, you know, like they might age with their customers. Like I'm not saying that's what we want to do, but like there is the element of our customers will get older and have slightly different needs, and we need to cater for that. Otherwise we'll lose them. Like we can't just sort of say we only care about, you know, 18 to 24-year-olds.
Excellent. I think we might have one more question and I'll hand back to Meg. So I guess this is probably a pretty not an easy one. What do you think has been your biggest challenge that you guys have faced in your life since you've gone live?
I think by and large, just like making the case, like that, like complacency, I guess, right? Like people were just kind of, you know, in general, Australian banks are seen as pretty good, and I think like trying to make the case and find ways to make the case that like that you should want more from your bank. Like it is hard. Like I think we've had more success than most at that, but there's a constant challenge. Is like you know, trying to I guess sell people on that dream, like that their bank can do more for them, because yeah, I think people, they're not thinking about, like, people don't generally wake up and think like, is my bank good enough? Should I find a new one? Like, it's just, I don't want to think about that stuff. So it's kind of bringing up the topic and then getting them to, and then like getting that behavioral change. I think that's definitely the challenge in this industry.
Awesome. Oh, thanks, Anson, for answering all those questions. Sorry to anyone whose questions we didn't get to. There's quite a lot of good ones in there. It's hard to actually filter through and choose some. I'll hand back over to you, Meg.
Yeah, thanks, Anson, and thanks for everyone. Like, there's been really great conversation in the background while you've been talking, Anson. I think people sharing their own experiences and yeah, a bit of back and forth around, you know, the challenges of dates and roadmaps as well. So you've definitely sparked some good conversation for everyone. Yeah, really appreciate it. And I think, yeah, just by the amount of conversation and questions that's generated, yeah, definitely pretty inspiring in terms of the journey you've been on so far. Yeah, it's awesome to hear.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So for those of you, I guess, who are wanting to know when our next event will be, the next event is likely to be in May. And fingers crossed, we're looking to confirm Teresa Torres, who's one of the leaders in, I guess, discovery, and particularly around remote discovery. She's been publishing some really awesome content around that topic. So probably quite a different approach maybe to the I guess, deliver fast and learn in product. I think Teresa has a very interesting take on, I guess, research techniques and working remotely. So stay tuned for that one. It'll be on our meetup page, so everyone should be across that. And you never know, sometimes we do end up having like a last minute event between now and then as well. So yeah, hopefully looking forward to seeing everyone on that next call. So we will be sharing the recording for this on the meetup page. So yeah, feel free to obviously yeah, share that around if you found it interesting tonight, and let your friends know about ProductTank Melbourne. We do hope one point this year or sometime in the future we'll be able to do face-to-face sessions again. But yeah, hopefully the webinars are yeah, helping you to connect with the product community locally as well as around the world. So thanks everyone for joining. And thanks, Nick, for the first time hosting. Emily's stepped away because she's on maternity leave at the moment. So Nick's done an awesome job of stepping in to help organise too. So
thanks, Meg.
Great. Thanks again, Anson. We really appreciated it, and I'm sure you'll get pings on Twitter maybe with some of those follow-up questions.
No worries.
Great.
See everyone.
Thanks a lot, everyone. Thanks for joining.
See everyone.